Evil and suffering makes the existence of God unlikely. This is what many atheists claim. This is a very high topic that denies the existence of God. But I will kind of uncover that in this video, going over main points that actually I believe that attest that is good evidence to the existence of God, and many points that has been brought up against me throughout my journey, I guess, of believing in Jesus. Now, first thing I want to go over is moral evil is not a created thing, but rather is the intent or choice against God's good purposes. It is the absence of good. Just like darkness is not a thing, but is the absence of light. Now, I know that doesn't exactly explain the act of evil itself, but I think that's very important to understand first before I get to that. So, and I want to go over too about the God I'm talking about, exactly who he is, just a little bit. So, as the Apostle Paul describes in Romans 11:33, says, "Oh, the depth of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God! How unsearchable are his judgments, and how inscrutable his ways." Inscrutable meaning we cannot entirely fathom his ways, nor entirely understand it outside from what God has given us through scriptures. And I also want to say God does not change. He does not discover. He's perfect forever before and forever after, with one original plan. That is the God I'm talking about. And now a little bit back on the inscrutable part, it kind of only makes sense that everything about him doesn't make sense. Because if it was a God that makes sense to us, that is very similar to us, then it will be a God that we have made from our own imagination that is very familiar to who we are. And that's, you're making a God like yourself. But this isn't necessarily exactly like that. It is a transcendent God, a God outside of human nature. So if you cannot create moral evil, therefore God had not made evil. He created humans with free will to share his glory and love. True form of love is obtain love for another. Like, I cannot kidnap a woman and force her to marry me and have children with me and expect her to love me back. So humans with the option to love God through relationship and following his commandments saw an opportunity to be more like God, then took that action, therefore leading into creation of evil itself. So let's put it this way. If I had a child and I told that child not to go to a certain area because it's dangerous, and apart from me there and her following my wisdom, it might get them hurt. So the child walks over there, gets hit by a car, is now in a coma. I had not created something evil, but rather the child, through her intent against my good purposes, led her to destruction. So God created us without needing us, permitting the possibility of evil through the fact that we have free will. Of course, knowing that it will come because he's an all-knowing God. So C.S. Lewis argued that during World War II, what the heck? Because of all the pain and suffering, shows much more truth to the existence of God. With a famous quote saying that you can't call a line crooked unless you have some idea of a straight line. Now let me kind of explain this. Everyone can for themselves can say if something is right or wrong, but there's always something going on in the world that everyone would naturally say it's wrong. Meaning there's some kind of moral reality that exists that is not defined by us, but morals written from birth, written in our hearts that we all tend to abide by. An objective moral standard that does not exist without God, an objective moral reality. As William Lane Craig says, if God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties do not exist. However, they do exist, therefore God exists. The majority of the world would objectively say what Hitler did was bad. It was quite evil. Now take out the existence of God, any opinions of that being wrong is arbitrary. It is all just relative. There is no absolute justification to say it's right or wrong, only your personal whim. Hitler thought he was right. How can you say he's wrong without it just being subjective of your own personal feelings? If you say yes, it's all relative, then let me ask you this. Is rape bad and evil at all times, for all people, in all places? Now, if you agree like myself, then it makes it a transcendent reality. It makes it objective morality. I want to go back from the first point that God created us to share his love and glory. A God who's very familiar with pain, a relational God. He wants a deep, intimate relationship with us because he loves us so much that he went until death for us. The God of the universe wants a personal relationship with you and I because he loves us, being made in his image to reflect him. The reason for bringing us about in the first place is to share his love and glory, giving us all that opportunity. Most Christians would agree that the hard, painful periods of life, ultimately good came from it in the long run. Now, I know there was a point in my life where I hated myself, I hated my sin, I cursed at God for it because I could not see why he was letting any of it happen to me. But after all said and was done, it was those moments in life that I am the most grateful for, because it was those moments God used to radically transform my life and open my eyes from spiritual blindness. Now, for all the pain and suffering in the world, from a God who's ever wise, inscrutable to the human understandings, Tim Keller points out, why couldn't it be possible that from God's vantage point, there are good reasons for all of them? Now, there's also this belief that Christianity is these rules, these obligations that seem like it's too much work. I don't want to do it because it doesn't work for me. Well, let me explain. So, I kind of go on the subject of freedom in God. If you murder someone based on your freedom, now having to live with guilt, is that real freedom? When you're getting a relationship with someone, now love them, sure, it takes away your freedom to flirt with others. However, with greater love, joy, and peace from another, with sacrificial love for another, bringing more joy in your life. As Tim Keller once again beautifully puts it, for a Christian it's the same with Jesus. The love of Christ constrains, but once you realize how Jesus changed for you and gave himself for you, you aren't afraid of giving up your freedom and therefore finding freedom in him. Now, what I actually believe to be one of the biggest evidence to support the existence of God is actually the Bible itself. So the Bible is written down by men, authored by God. Is my take on it. Here's why. It's written by over 40 authors in 3 different languages in 3 different continents over the span of 1,500 years. The Bible has over 63,779 cross-references. Give you a little image to see what that looks like. So throughout the entire Bible, it prophesies about Jesus coming and doing what he said he could come to do, and he came and did it. And so with over 100 major messianic prophecies, throughout the book of Isaiah, prophesying about Jesus being written roughly 700 years before the event had happened. And now for extra security, later you'll see why I'm specifying the book of Isaiah. So the Bible is the only historical document in the world that has prophesied and come true, only biblical prophecies that came to life, at least ones like this. The Bible being historically the most attested books in the world, particularly the resurrection of Jesus Christ being one of the best attested events in ancient history, which is incredibly important because if Jesus really did rise from the dead, then all this really is true. If he really didn't rise from the dead, then my faith is in nothing but a bunch of fairy tales and baloney. And so Jesus considered the Old Testament of the Bible authoritative at the time, called the Tanakh, what we call the Old Testament. So Jesus had appeared to the woman first, then the disciples, then the apostles, and a mass appearance to 500 people at once. And the Jews believed in one single God, yet hundreds of them began worshiping Jesus overnight. Even for the Jews, it was complete blasphemy to worship a human. Even so many of them going unto death for their beliefs. And the explanation for that is because of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So many people make claims like the Bible has been translated many, many times, so it's no longer accurate. So the earliest documents or oldest Bibles we have to this day is called the Codex Sinaiticus and the Codex Vaticanus, being the made Greek Bibles, made in the 4th century or early 300s AD. So yeah, although parts of them are missing, they're not entirely complete just due to time. Even though they're near complete and they're very foundational for our modern Bibles that we use today, and they translate exactly the same. Meaning that even though from the 4th century we still have Bibles that have not yet been mistranslated and have not changed from that time. And now, something cool is that the fairy tales and legends, they take hundreds of years to come about. But the Apostle Paul had received a creed, and it says that Christ died, was buried, was raised, and appeared to Cephas, then the 12, then more than 500. But what's cool about this creed is that creed is dated back to 3035 AD, which for a historical document, that is pretty incredible. But I won't be going too much into this. I kind of want to get over the main point of the book of Isaiah, because this is an entirely different topic, but just to help proclaim the truth to the prophecies. Because unless it was written way before, unless we know that, then only then can we know it's an actual prophecy. So the earliest manuscripts of the book of Isaiah we had for the longest time what came from the Masoretic text, which was from the Middle Ages, until in 1947 we discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls, which contain the Great Scroll of Isaiah. And now the Great Scroll of Isaiah being dated back to 300 to 100 BC, before Christ. So that it was 1,000 years apart from the Masoretic text, yet even though they're that far apart, they are near identical in translations, and still near identical to our modern Bibles today, which is pretty incredible. Now, does this make the Bible perfect? No, but it makes the words in it worth considering. If anyone's intellectually honest with themselves, you understand that there's too many coincidences to be a coincidence, and that these are quite literal miracles that cannot be made from man. Like I said from the beginning, the Bible's written down by men, but authored by God. It's something we have to realize, that God had already solved everything. All the pain and suffering, He solved it all. By coming down to earth, humbling Himself, dwelling in the flesh as the person of Jesus, becoming like the least of us, taking on the wrath of the Father, the wrath that you and I are supposed to deserve on Judgment Day. Then crucified on the cross, thinking of me and you, then to rise again 3 days later, defeating sin and giving us a path to eternal life with Christ and a new creation outside of pain and suffering. Now refute all of this, everything you know about God, the existence of God, and be atheistic, or whatever it may be. What does this solve for you? What does this solve for your life? Then refuting the God who had really come down for your sake because He loves you. Now, whether you're atheist, agnostic, Islamic, Hindu, Buddha, or self-proclaiming Christian, no matter what you've done or no matter what you're doing, Jesus loves you, and He is calling you by name, and He wants a relationship with you because He loves you, which is why He had took on the iniquity and wickedness that you do and putting it upon Himself because of the sin that you do every day. Guilt and the shame and the burdens you bear, He had carried it on the cross for you, yet you want to reject Him as an evil God. He still loves you.